Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Let us soak it in because it is Torah, and we are deep into Bereshit, into Genesis now, and we are approaching Hanukkah. And so while our Torah portion is not Hanukkah, I believe that there are more than a couple of lessons for Hanukkah to be found in this Torah portion. And Ben, who was with me this morning for another lesson of Hanukkah, same Torah portion, different lesson perhaps this time. But at some point, maybe your amazing insight will come back because I'm like sitting with that all day today. So, hi Dan, good to see you. So, here we are making our way through the generations of Bereshit. This week's Torah portion is called Vayeshev because Jacob, Israel, well, we hope he's now sheving, which means to sit or to settle. So there's something perhaps descriptive, perhaps aspirational about the settling nature, about Jacob being settled. However, the Torah portion begins by saying that he was settled in Canaan. So he's had his journey, or this piece of his journey, but the focus now shifts to one of his sons, Joseph. And I want to focus on Joseph primarily today, although none of us are in families. We're not isolated. We are connected to the generations before and after, and across generation, in the same generation as well. And our focus turns to Joseph. Now, Joseph is, and we talked about this a bit this morning, Joseph takes up a huge amount of real estate in the book of Genesis. I mean, really, for all intents and purposes, for the rest of the book, it's Joseph's. Not entirely, but largely. So we also see Joseph growing. We see his growth over the course of many chapters, as we would hope. And the reason I feel like this Torah portion might shed some insight, let me rephrase that, set it up better, might shed some light on the holiday that's coming up, is because the holiday is filled with light, Hanukkah. And I want us to think about before we look at the Torah portion, quick one word, you can use the chat or you can unmute. Quick one word, when you think of Hanukkah, what's Hanukkah about? One word answers, quick.
Light.
Light, great. What else?
Freedom of religion.
Freedom of, that's one big long word. Freedom of religion, perfect.
Survival.
Survival.
Conquering an enemy.
Conquering enemies, is that what you said, Susan? Great. Nina?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think it's reestablishing possession of a piece of, I would say, real estate.
Okay. Maybe we'll go with real estate. That's closer to one word, real estate.
Right.
Okay. And when I asked the kids in our school this, they all said a word that none of you have said. Miracles.
Yeah.
Miracles, right? I know it was there. I made you choose one. So I want us to think about miracles in the context of Hanukkah, and we'll come back to really the question of what I believe there's more than one miracle. I know there is more than one miracle that we're celebrating when it comes to Hanukkah, but it all involves all of the things you were just talking about, all of those sort of one words, right? Repossession of land, the temple, light, real estate, freedom of religion, all of these things. Okay, with no further ado, let's make our way through this. We're going to actually, hopefully, if we get to it, quite a good chunk of the Torah portion because there's so much in it. Okay, let me just move everything so I can see everybody or see some of you anyway. Excuse me. Okay, now Jacob was settled in the land where his father had sojourned, the land of Canaan. Okay, so now we're at Yaakov, settled, Vayeshev. This then is the line of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph, we're already on to Joseph, tended the flocks with his brothers as a helper to the sons of his father's wives Bilhah and Zilpah, and Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father. Okay, so a little bit of context to make sure we're all on the same page. Right out of the gate, we have Joseph working with his brothers who are half brothers, right? Jacob had his children through 4 different wives. And so here he is tending the flock with some of them. And what does he do? He goes to daddy. Their dad, as I used to say, Dad, my sibling did this, my sibling did that. I'll spare you the real whining that happened in my house when I was growing up. But you get the idea. And that's exactly what happens. So immediately from the get-go, we just came into contact with Joseph in this Torah portion. What do we know? Just from this point, what do we know about Joseph? Just what's in that verse.
He's clueless about relating to other people, and he's a tattletale, and he's a papa's boy, as we know, and a favorite, but he's clueless in this respect.
Pompous, favorite, tattletale, and I'm coming back to your first and last one because this is the one that we should say with clueless about how to relate to people. And as I said, Ben heard this again. Ben, like your Josh is sticking with me today. He strikes me as one of those people, and I'll say kids, but I think adults do this too, who so desperately wants to be accepted and, to use your word, Susan, is clueless about how to go about doing it. He's trying and he's doing all the wrong things. Well, he's only done one thing so far. He's working with him and he goes to dad and tattles. But this is, again, the beginning because we see his character and his morality evolve over the rest of the book of Genesis. Okay. Keep going. Now Israel, who is Jacob, loved Joseph best of all his sons. He was his child of old age, Ben Zakunim, and he had made him an ornamented tunic. So again, we talked about this a bit this morning. This is Andrew Lloyd Webber made this famous. What was the gift from Jacob to Joseph?
Coat.
The coat, the Technicolor dream coat, as the musical likes to tell us. And I was sharing earlier, the word the Hebrew doesn't actually say multicolored or colored or technicolored. It doesn't say that. It's a word that's one of these Hebrew words that's a bit of an anomaly and is hard to define. And so our tradition has tried to define it in many different ways. Oh yes, Zach, thank you. We will come back to that. It is very unsettling that a father would favor one of his children this way. I will come back to that momentarily because you are 100% correct. The commentary that I recently learned is that another way to define that hard to define Hebrew word that describes this coat is that it has something to do with the seams. the seams, like the seams on the sleeve. And the understanding of that is that the rabbis say his sleeves were extra long. In other words, it's the opposite of somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves and get in there. So his father gave him this coat, whether it's very fancy because it's Technicolor, or whether it is structured in a way that's made for a white collar person as opposed to his brothers who are more blue collar, is a way to put it into modern parlance. This is what his father gave him. And to go back to Zach's point, it is terribly unsettling that a father would do this so openly. Except, why do we, so let's stop for a moment. Why do we think that Jacob, Israel, would so openly favor one of his kids? He's got a lot of them. Cindy, go ahead.
Well, he's the son of his favorite wife.
Yes.
But one thing I've noticed, like in the prayers, when we talk about our matriarchs, although Leah was the first wife and the firstborn, when we say the matriarchs, we say Rachel, then Leah, which I think is wrong.
Okay, so actually, here's just a little kind of fun fact for you that I only know this because of where I started my rabbinate. That, the imahot, the matriarchs were added later. But so when they were added, and it started in the Reform movement, then they are added to the Amidah, there was question about how to make the music phraseology. I don't know what the right language is. How to make the
Musicality.
musicality. Thank you. It's not really musicality. It is the language in with the music. How to make it work. And they actually, I don't know who that they was, the Reform movement leadership put a call out to cantors at the time. And I think this was in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, and said, somebody help us figure out how to add this line in without losing the trope, the chanting, and different cantors entered it in different ways. And the cantor of blessed memory, the cantor emeritus at my first synagogue, proposed it the way you just said it, Cindy. Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leav, Elohei Rachel.
But they're both 2 syllables.
I'm not the musicologist.
Yeah.
But he lost. And so I think it was more of a how do we squeeze this in kind of thing. Susan, go ahead. Oh, you're muted, Susan.
Good question. When we started, my husband was in the national board of the URJ, and they had it the other way before. So then for some reason they changed it, but I didn't know why. This is an interesting explanation, but I think it was, I don't know, but who gets more importance related to the first matriarchs. But I get confused which one is which now because we started with it the other.
Yeah, exactly. But regardless of where it lands, it raises the same dynamic that on one side from the women is being raised with the children. There is favoritism, period, undeniable, black and white. There's favoritism here. We know Rachel was the favorite wife, the most beloved, I shouldn't say favorite, the most beloved wife. We know that the Torah just told us Joseph is the favored son. But guess what? Jacob didn't come up with this out of nowhere. He lived it, right? Remember, he and his brother each had a parent favoring them. So this is not new. And we see this over and over and over through Bereshit, that some of these same habits get passed from generation to generation. But yes, You are absolutely correct, Zach. It is unfair, and it does fly in the face of thou shalt not covet, very much so. We haven't quite gotten to that part of the Torah yet, but that doesn't matter because when we look at Torah, I think the Torah flies in the face of a lot of, this piece in particular flies in the face of a lot of values that we could pull on. And I still want us to look to see what the wisdom is that we can gain here. Susan, one more time, go ahead. You're muted again.
So, is this a clueless thing in Jacob that is also passed on to Joseph? I mean, this is pretty clueless too, to so overtly and glaringly show the favoritism. That doesn't.
I think you're right. You could say he should have known better, right? I mean, look how his life turned out because of the favoritism that was played out in his family of origin. Absolutely. I think there might be a little bit more than cluelessness. There could be trauma that he's still living in. There could be grief that he's still living in. He's just not, he makes a bad choice. He does, as our Imahot and Avot and Imahot do. So, but again, it is the growth that we look to. Okay, so let's keep reading.
Can you enlarge the text?
Oh, sure. I have so many boxes open. Give me one moment. Oh, sorry. I just enlarged something that you can't see. Better? Okay, great. Okay, verse 4. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him so that they could not speak a friendly word to him. No surprise. They were it ate at them. And I actually love the Hebrew here. The English translation is they couldn't speak a friendly word to him, but the Hebrew is they couldn't speak to him with shalom. There was nothing peaceful that they were able to even utter basic words of shalom. So there is a real wedge being driven here. And the question as we move forward is how much of this is Joseph a recipient of, and how much of this is he a player, a participant in? So when once Joseph had a dream, which he told to his brothers, and they hated him even more. There's the clueless again. He said to them, "Hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were binding sheaves in the field when suddenly my sheaf stood up and remained upright. Then your sheaves gathered around and bowed low to my sheaf." Not expecting the brothers are going to love this too much. His brothers answered, "Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule over us?" And they hated him even more for this talk about his dreams. But we aren't done, because he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I've had another dream. And this time, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." And we told it to his father and his brothers. This time, so here comes Jacob again. His father woke up and berated him. "What," he said to him, "what is this dream that you have dreamed? Are we to come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow low to you to the ground?" So his brothers were wrought up at him, and his father kept the matter in mind. So Jacob sees what's going on here. He got wrapped up in it a bit, but he just kept the matter in mind. He protected Shamar et hadavar. He held on to the deal, to this idea. One time, when his brothers had gone to pasture their father's flock at Shechem, Israel, Jacob, said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing at Shechem. Come, I will send you to them." And he answered, "I am ready." So I want to stop there. What is he ready for? And the Hebrew for those who are familiar, of I am ready, is the word hineni, which really is I'm here. And we hear that word earlier on multiple times in the story of the binding of Isaac. And we know that the word hineni means at minimum, I am here fully present. It's not like I happen to be, okay, I got it, Dad. It's not one of those. It's, I'm here. I'm ready. But there might even be more to it. Maybe there's some divine intervention. So, what is he ready for? On the very surface level, what's Jacob calling him to do? Benina, what's Jacob calling him to do?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think he's calling him to do whatever it is that they saw before happening, that the child who wasn't the firstborn took over and became the person who kind of like continued the legacy of the whole, how would you call it, the Jewish movement? But it's not exactly that what it was at that time. But
Okay.
I think it's just like the young one always took over, no matter whether it was
So that's what, so he's there to do what? To take over?
the event that caused that the whole thing happened, but it just happened, and for different reasons. So here we are again, but here he's not just facing one; he's got another 11, right, or 10.
Right. Jacob is calling him to go and find his brothers while they're pasturing in the field. And he says,
Here
I
I am,
am here. I'm really ready
like
to.
he knows what's coming.
If only, if only. So maybe it means he knows I'm here, ready for what's about to be a really big challenge
Leadership.
or survival, as the story turns out. Maybe he says, I'm here. I'm really ready for to be your to follow. I'm your favorite, Dad. I am ready to take the helm here because that's what you want. And maybe he doesn't really even know what he's showing up for, but he just knows he's in it to win it, as they say. Okay. So I'm gonna keep going. And he, Yaakov, Jacob, said to Joseph, go and see how your brothers are and how the flocks are faring, and bring me back word. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. When he reached Shem, a man came upon him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, what are you looking for? And so, okay, I want to stop here again. The word for man is a very direct translation. The word is ish. A man happened upon him. He just showed up in town. It's almost like he's in the middle of the fields. Well, he was. And someone approached him. Some things to consider. How does this Ish know that he's looking for something? Why does this Ish have the chutzpah, as we like to say, to approach somebody who's just standing there and ask what he's looking for? He doesn't say, can I help you? He says, what are you looking for? Okay, Brad, please.
Well, couple thoughts. After with the evocation of the word hineni, of course, we think of God. So we're wondering, is this a divine being? But the other thing that has always puzzled me about this story is like why it's here. And is it metaphorically trying to tell us that we're being asked who's lost metaphorically? Is it Jacob? Joseph, who's lost in his relationships with his brothers? Is it the brothers who are somehow lost? So I really, you could have the story. Story could flow without this
Exactly.
little passage. So why is it here? And I struggle with trying to come up with an explanation of why it's here. So
Thank you
maybe you
for
can
raising.
help.
Yeah, I think I do too, which is why I stopped here. And actually, looking back at the Hebrew of the question he asks is Ma tivakesh, which can be translated as what are you looking for, but it can also be translated as what would you like? What do you request? What do you need? Right? So to your point, Brad, it's very unlikely that this is just, do you need directions? Like when I'm driving through Minnesota and people are so nice, they just automatically assume, do you need directions somewhere? That's not what this is, right? There's something more to it. Cindy and then Susan and then Panina.
Yeah, my understanding is that there's some midrash that it's the angel Gabriel intervening at this time.
Right. Yeah. There is something divine because where else does this word ish show up? And Susan, go ahead I don't know if that's what you're going to say.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It came before with Jacob struggling with what Ish, the angel. So I think, I mean, the link that Brad suggested, I would link the two, the Hanani and the Ish appearing as both kind of divine instances, because Hanani usually, or has been, I am here in response to God. And Ish here, all of a sudden, Ish is there now. He's not fighting with him, but Ish points him towards the road towards the brothers. So where are you? Here I am. What's going to be?
Yes,
Where are you in life?
this is
So
definitely no mere human encounter. It's, it's like from a movie. This Ish just shows up in the middle of nowhere. He just shows up, knows what to ask, and then we haven't even read on yet, which we will momentarily, that he then opens up, and the Ish has an answer for him. So this is not just a chance human encounter. Panina and then Brett.
I would like to reaffirm what was just said, that it's a divine intervention. It happens again with Jacob wrestling with the angel. Now this one, he's meeting this guy. There is always like I would say, a superior force that will maneuver the events.
Great.
Or make the events happen.
Mhm.
But they show all the times that divine intervention to show that nothing happened just in a bubble, that things were meant to be.
Everything, there's a plan for everything here. We know there's something bigger going on here,
Right.
which as we make our way through this story, we will continue to unpack. Thank you. Brad.
Rabbi, if you look at the whole arc of the Joseph story, is God there in the story other than this Ish?
God, it's interesting because I'd have to look to see where God shows up in the Torah itself with Joseph, but the commentators are pretty unanimous that Joseph's ability, I don't want to give away too much, tune in over the next, number of weeks, but his ability to continue to survive and thrive through, I mean, he's like a cat with 9 lives, right? Terrible things keep happening to him, and he continues to gain in power. So the commentators are pretty unanimous that the reason that happens is that God is with him throughout. So I'd have to look to see where it is in the Torah itself, but that is a very commonly understood explanation for how Joseph continued to prevail given all of these things. Susan.
Well, it's Nate stated that God is with him, but Joseph later, when he gets out of these difficulties, says that God was with me when he's interpreting the dreams, when he
Yes,
goes
thank you.
to Pharaoh, and he says, you know, it wasn't I who was, but it was through God that I knew this. So
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Right. There's
But
definitely,
God doesn't seem to be playing an active role
I think that
here.
raises the question,
He
Brad.
doesn't.
I think that raises a question which has to be taken in the context of Torah and in particular Genesis, Bereshit, of what does it look like for God to take an active role? I mean, God is not an active character the way, you know, we understand God at Mount Sinai, for example, much more active. But, you know, I think this question of Hineni and this Ish, you know, it's all relative to how we understand God being active.
Rabbi, forgive me, but historically, hasn't God, this is a question I've wrestled with personally, so forgive me if I'm digressing, but historically, hasn't God been an intervening God? In other words, hasn't he performed miracles and I'm wondering what you meant by what you just said.
God is in many places. I mean, I'm trying to think up to this point in the Torah. Yes, God does show up. I mean, I'm thinking about obviously creation. I'm thinking about the devastation of the flood with Noah. I'm thinking about those come through, and then we think about other agents of God that come through in narratives like the binding of Isaac and in the wrestling match that Jacob has had to be renamed Israel. So God showing up, but God shows up differently all across the Torah, just like God shows up differently for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Great question.
You mind if I ask you something that weighs heavily on my mind?
Sure, please.
Okay. Where was God in 1939?
I wish beyond wish that I had an answer for that, Zach. There are many different answers to it. But I thank you for putting it out there. And I think it has to sit as a question because if there were answers, we would have had them a long time, easy answers, we would have them a long time ago. However, I can tell you without trying to answer it that many people at the time and since then have had various answers about what they believe where God was. And many say God was hidden. Some say there are theologians, if you can call it that, who say God is dead. There is no God. God wasn't there. I'm not saying this is me. There are theologians. And there are other people who say, where was God? God was in the people who survived. You know, God was in the fight. God was in all of these things. This is a humongous question that I actually think is really important to keep on the table as we keep reading, because Joseph is about to endure the first of many really intense struggles. And so the question of where is God for him in that remains. And as we move forward, I want to also remind ourselves that we've seen hints. We've seen Hineni. We've seen this Ish. So God, something divine there's something beyond human that's going on here, some bigger meaning. Pnina, very quickly before we move on.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to try to make it quick.
Please.
We know that Abraham was the one who went down to Egypt also once because it was famine. And here his father is sending him to the fields to his brothers. And I think what happened in history is every time that there was like kind of like a famine, or the fields and the crops were under subject, they wind up going down to Egypt because they were in very good relationship at the time. And this is where Abraham went also. So it's like gives us a hint that you are about to enter another era again, where there is going to be a journey to Egypt. So, and then from there, the reconstruction or reinventing of the Jewish nation by Moses will happen later. Like a hint of the things to come that kind of like built on what happened in the past.
Yeah, as is the way of Torah study. So
Right.
the timeline is not linear when
Right. There is a saying, "En
Ein
mukdam
mukdam ve'ein me'ochar
b'Torah."
b'Torah.
Right.
Okay, let's keep going. Because what I don't want is for us to think that God was absent, because I think there's more going on here. So the man speaks to him, "What are you looking for, or what are you requesting?" And he answered, "I'm looking for my brothers. Could you tell me where they are pasturing?" Notice he doesn't say, "My brothers' names are," or "they look like this," or "this group of 10 guys. They're a little schlemiel, they're pasturing." But anyway, he doesn't, "I'm looking for my brothers." And sure enough, this man has an answer. The man said, "They've gone from here. They've gone from here, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dotan.'" So Joseph followed his brothers and found them at Dotan. So this man, this Ish, knew exactly where to direct him. This Ish set him up for what's about to come. And there's a lot in what's about to come. The brothers, saw him from afar, and before he came close to them, they conspired to kill him. This is what you get for, I know there's more to this, but favoritism does not end well. They said to one another, "Here comes that dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we can say, 'A savage beast devoured him.'" They're coming up with their alibi, right? "We shall see what comes of his dreams." Of course, his dreams were that he was going to rule over them. And they're saying, "No, no, 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 we're going to show you what's actually going to happen here." But one of the brothers, when Reuben heard it, he tried to save him from them. He said, "Let us not take his life." Take a breath. It's all going to be okay. Oh, wait, Reuben went on. "Shed no blood. Cast him into that pit out in the wilderness, but do not touch him yourselves, intending to save him from them and restore him to his father." When Joseph came up to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of this coat, the ornamented tunic that he was wearing, the symbol of all that they think is wrong of Joseph, or the symbol of everything that makes him different, or that led to him being, thinking he's such a dreamer that he can rule over them. So, and they took him and they cast him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it.
Here we go. The famine.
Then they sat down to a meal. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, their camels bearing gum, balm, ladanum, to be taken to Egypt. So, excuse me. How did this go for Joseph? How's he doing here?
Not well.
He's having a rough day.
Yeah.
But it's better than it could have been, right? They had it all figured out. Let's kill him, blame the animals. Our hands will be clean of his blood. Or so we thought. And so we're just going to throw him into this pit. But Susan says, It's not going well for him. So the tradition, and I want to go a little quickly through this so we can get to the other piece of this. The tradition, the rabbis ask many questions about not the last verse. I added the last verse as I did this morning because I find it so cruel. They threw him into the pit and then they sat down and had a picnic. I can almost imagine the picnic table right on the side of this pit. They throw him in. It's like it doesn't even matter to them. And they had a meal. This is terrible.
The typical Jewish response. There's a tragedy, let's eat.
Let's eat. Or, yes, it's a tragedy, let's eat, or just the opposite. Because, right? Or this is so not a tragedy. We're going to delude ourselves into thinking this is not a big deal, or that we're going to delude ourselves into, now I'll get into my own pop psychology of family systems. We, the brothers, will delude ourselves into thinking we really don't care about him that much, that we can leave him to die and ignore it enough to sit down and have a meal. Either way, it's not good. Go ahead.
I find it interesting, Rabbi Leah, that if you look at the line, I mean, Joseph has basically gone through the gauntlet here, okay? Yet he has not responded in kind, which I believe is one of the pillars of the Torah, in that one should not do to others what you would not want done to yourself.
Right. So do you think this is his, perhaps this was coming to him because of the way he treated his brothers?
Do I think it was coming to him? The way he would treat. I think his brothers were the protagonists, certainly. I think that the fact that he did not respond in kind in and of itself was a message. But if you fast forward later in the story of Joseph, and forgive me, I'm not a historian, but didn't Joseph forgive his brothers?
Yes.
There was a reunion with forgiveness on all sides. I mean,
Yeah.
a reunion. Yeah, very, very emotional reunion.
Right. So what I get out of the story, is pretty much that he didn't, he didn't strike back, if you will, and he forgave them. So maybe this is a story about forgiveness. I don't know.
Well, there's the opening for it for sure, because this story is far from over. And I think any encounter that any of us has, we love to tell stories of things that, especially when there's conflict, as isolated encounters, but none of them really are. Everything is connected to what comes before and what comes after. And so Joseph's story didn't start here and it didn't end here. Same with the brothers and same with their relationship. So there's the opening for forgiveness, without a doubt. Susan and then Brett.
So, several things. When Zach asked, he didn't fight back. He was in no position to fight back. There were
Yes, I missed that.
11 fellows against one ornamented coat guy. So it took only towards the end of the story for forgiveness. And the quote is from Rabbi Hillel: do not do to others what you have not done to yourself. Then the other thing that was raised was eating. Somehow, I think we've seen some place before there was callous people eating, having lunch or callously when there was some tragedy. However, you can also look at, and he said, this is what Jewish people do. What happens with the Shiva? People are mourning and you give them food to sustain them, besides, showing up. And that's that life continues and food is life. So you can look at the banquets from two different perspectives. One is callousness when there's a tragedy. The other thing is showing comfort for the gathering for the people. So
Thank you. Yeah, all very good points. Yeah, here is Joseph. The Torah doesn't use these words, although I have some commentary, but he's left to die in this pit. I mean, it is better than him being killed, but it's not like he is in a position of any power in this moment. It's the topography of the scene kind of is a metaphor for the power dynamics going on here, right? They cast him downward. They are on top. They are over him. It's the opposite of what the dream said.
So one of the things that you put in bold, there was no water in the pit.
I put that in bold because I want us to look at a couple commentaries on that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting when they see him from afar, they the comment is not, oh, there's the uppity one, there's the brat, there's the egotist, whatever. There's the dreamer. And that I find that interesting. There's the one who dreams, because from their perspective, and I guess maybe this was somewhat commonplace, dreams can be malevolent. And so maybe their reaction is not that. I mean, maybe it's somewhat understandable given the attitudes that people had at the time about dreams.
Thank you for that. I think that's very likely, Brad. I also, regardless of whether it's a malevolence, what we do know is that by them naming him, there's the dreamer. First of all, it takes out the relational, like, oh, here's our brother and his name is Joseph. We know this guy, right? It removes that. It labels him, and it labels him as something that by definition is distant from them. They are distancing themselves from him. So thank you for that. Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of points. I don't think, after when Joseph got thrown in the pit, I don't think he was worried. I think that he's going to have already dreamed or thought that he was going to somehow rescued to fulfill his dream. The other thing is the brothers took the dream coat. What did they do with it? And did this ever show up again?
This is it. Oh, yeah, yes, it does. Because it's proof of, they use it to later on, they use it to give Jacob a sign of life, right? But they don't even know if it's real because they end up losing track of him. They don't know what happens to him, right? They have a plan. We'll get back to him later. But they lose track of him. And so the coat does come back, but they strip him of the symbol of his being the favorite, the special one. Susan, last comment, then I want to look at some commentaries that will bring us back to some of this.
Responding to Brad's point about dreamer, and I think that's significant. Jacob had dreams and Joseph had dreams, and Joseph's dreams pull him out of the ditch, essentially, or out of the pit, the cell that he was in. And what is dreams? The guys, the 11 guys are working in the fields. And when you speak about dreamers, you usually think of the either artistic and creative types, and or those that have some contact with divine inspiration, which can come in dreams. So they're already identifying, where the Torah does, that Jacob is the one that has some insight from the divine.
But if he's such a good dreamer, why doesn't he see this coming?
Because that's thinking.
Then we wouldn't have a story.
And if he's such a good dreamer, then why doesn't he understand? Why can't he dream project enough, I mean, I'm using a different word, to understand what his brothers need to bring him close, as opposed to continuing to have him be more alienated, whether it's them alienating him or him alienating himself.
But that's the frontal lobe. That's how you.
So, Ben, do you want to share your, I don't want to put you on the spot.
Me?
I'm sorry, Benjamin.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. And I apologize, I had to break off for a moment, some personal business. But I was thinking today that this reminds me, and I'm no psychologist or medical doctor, but I have personal experience with somebody who has on the spectrum or Asperger's and a form of autism. And he, those characteristics that I've experienced are somebody that's kind of into themselves, maybe some misses social cues, very smart. This individual I know speaks multiple languages and has advanced degrees, but has a hard time holding down a job. So I was thinking, could this be the first example of that developmental disability shown in the Torah?
And Ben and I are going to now go write an article about this because I am in love with this interpretation. I will just say.
Well, I'd be honored to be even considered for that.
So,
Rabbi Leah, thank you.
yeah, so I mean, it's possible. We don't know, but there are a lot of markers there for that, or some. He is distanced. Whatever came before, whether it was from him or from his brothers or because of his father, whether he was a participant or an active player, he has become almost dehumanized, so removed from the relationship with his brothers that they are capable of doing this really terrible thing to him. Dan, did you want to say something? I couldn't tell.
Well, I don't know where the button is to raise your hand, so
It's okay.
anyway.
You unmuted. I saw you were unmuted.
Yeah. It seems to me from reading the story that the story's whole purpose is to show that no matter what people do, God has a plan and he carries it out. And so God had made this prediction about Joseph's life through the dream. And we see that in every situation that Joseph encounters, God is with him and God makes sure that he progresses. And ultimately, the prediction comes true because he does become the leader over his brothers and his father. So I think that is really what this whole story is about. And all of these like psychological things are just things that modern people try to figure out in the interstices of the story.
So I think that is a very astute read of the story. And I would counter a little bit, only that I think there are many purposes to the story. I think that is a huge through line. And I think that I know that there's so much to take out of this. But that is definitely a through line. Penina, I see your hand. I'm not even going to share my screen for these, but I want to share a couple of the commentaries that I mentioned that I have on this page about the verse that says, the pit was empty, there was no water in it. And why is that significant? The sages have gone crazy over this because those are superfluous words. Wouldn't it have been enough just to say the pit was empty? Why does it need to go on and say there was no water in it? And there are many commentaries, but one of which is that from the 13th century commentator Hizkuni says that it said so that if the pit had been filled with water, the brothers would not have thrown him into it, as would have been equivalent to drowning them with their own hands. They had already ruled out doing something like that. So they decided he didn't know how to swim. If there was water in it, we want to be very clear, there was no water, because if there was water and they had thrown him in, then their hands would have his blood on them. And they didn't want that. They were willing to do really terrible things, but they didn't want to be directly involved. And Rashi gives the kind of the commentary that many other commentaries have been built on, that says that the second naming of that is that yes, there was water and there was no it was empty, there was no water, but instead, and he quotes the Talmud on this, there were serpents and scorpions in it. So, and that is to say, it wasn't like they were just putting them in. I mean, I think of, I don't know if any of you have ever played Gaga. I grew up at camp with a Gaga pit. I mean, I loved being in the Gaga pit. It was super fun. This is not a fun place for him to be. There were serpents and scorpions. He was not safe. He was all alone, and he was left to try, and his power temporarily had been stripped from him, and he was left to try and survive. Penina, very quickly, because I do want to tie this back to Hanukkah. You're muted. You're muted, Penina.
All right. The gardeners were here, so they were making a lot of noise, so I turned it off. Anyhow, I'm going back to the story that Moses also became a personality. He started out to be thrown into the water. And the idea is that there was a belief that a true leader, a big leader, is going to come out from some kind of water, that two big seas are going to merge. And that was called the Emuna Elis. It was a belief that some great leader is going to come from where the water, one body of water meets another body of water. So the fact that they mention water with Joseph, it means he is not yet the personality that Moses later on became. It's not, we're not there yet.
No, he's evolving. He's growing, and that's why we have
Exactly,
another
but
half of
we're
a book.
not there yet to where Moses was taken out of the water, but this time he became the Messiah for his own people.
Okay.
Gave us the Torah and all the whole thing. That's the only thing that came into my mind, how to tie the two stories, and the emphasis is with the water.
There are many ways. So here's my take. We don't know how big different people have different ideas about how big this pit was, how deep it was, how wide it was.
Right.
He was below ground, but he was not down and out. You know, I'm mixing metaphor with topography here, right? He was not down and out. He was not down for the count, I should say, because they chose not to kill him, right? He was there, and then he goes on to have this amazing story. See you next week, and the week after that, and the week after that, right? But this goes back, I believe that the connection to Hanukkah goes back, and we always read Joseph around the time of Hanukkah, goes back to the description of him as a dreamer. And it goes back to understanding that God really is there with him.
Right.
God is there when he says Hineni. There's something divine in this Ish that he encounters. That's why we read this whole thing. He is a dreamer, and as much as him being a dreamer causes him to be hated by his brothers and gets him into this, I want to offer today that I believe that his being a dreamer is what also allows him to survive. And not only to survive, but to thrive. To go back to Brad's point about different interpretations of that description of dreamer. Now, of course, the brothers used it to distance themselves from him. But to be a dreamer is to also be able to, I mean, I think about a dreamer in the fields walking around with her head up in the sky, which is often problematic and sometimes an amazing survival mechanism. So, Hanukkah is coming. There are lots of rules about Hanukkah, some of which, are more present than others. But I wanted to share that in the Talmud, here, I'll share my screen and read it very quickly. This is what the Talmud says about how we light how and when we light a Hanukkah menorah, a Hanukkah. A Hanukkah lamp that a person placed above 20 cubits, meaning very high, is invalid, such as a sukkah whose roofing is more than 20 cubits high, and just as an alleyway whose beam is symbolic fourth partition in order to blah, 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 are invalid. The reason is the same in all three cases. people do not usually raise their heads and see objects at a height above 20 cubits. As there is a requirement to see all of these, they are deemed invalid when placed above that height. And beyond that, there are rules about when we're supposed to light the Hanukkah. Traditionally, and the Talmud says this, if you get home at 11 p.m. or midnight, or as my son who came home from college last night at 1 in the morning, if it were Hanukkah, the Talmud would say, don't light your Hanukkah lamp. You are supposed to light the Hanukkah at the Talmud's equivalent of rush hour, when people are coming and going in the street, when it's busy, and at a level that people can actually see. They might have to put their eyes up a little bit, but there's a hope of them actually seeing. Why? Because one of the ultimate goals of Hanukkah is Pirsum Hanes, publicizing the miracle and keeping our eyes open to be able to show that miracles happen, show that we have faith that miracles can happen, and to feel it, to experience it ourselves, and to publicize it for others. So this is where, I bring this back to Joseph. This juxtaposition is, I believe, about a matter of perspective, that we need to be able to keep miracles in sight and not lose hope and not lose sight that amazing things can happen. That's what Hanukkah is the story of. And Joseph, we only got part of his story today, but we've already established the story goes on and on and on. Amazing things happen for Joseph. Amazing things can happen when we're open to being there with something bigger than ourselves. You might call it God, you might not call it God. You might call it miracle, you might not call it miracle, but something bigger than ourselves. And also when we can see it and we don't lose sight that it's a possibility. So that is my wish for all of us during these very dark times, to know that the story is not done being told. As exhausting as times have been right now, the story is not done being told, and we can't lose sight of the miracles that can happen. So with that, Shabbat Shalom. Early
Shabbat
wishes
Shalom.
for a happy Hanukkah. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
Happy Hanukkah. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom.
Happy
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.